I just wanted to check that the recording is working, and that is working, so that's fine. What I think we should do is just go through the agenda, and the first item is really a little bit over to the audience. In the papers, my reflection was that I'm finding the unit a fairly fast-paced one. There's resources, assessments, activities, discussion boards, collaborate sessions. They're all keeping me personally quite busy. And I'm just wondering how you're finding the journey so far, whether you're coping, whether you're finding the learning experiences useful, what's working, what's not. So maybe if we can just go around the room and get your feedback on these questions. So maybe, Catherine, could I go over to you first?
Hi, Frank. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh. Hello? No.
Sorry, Catherine, I actually can't hear you. I'm not sure whether anybody else can.
Hello? No. No. Oh, Shelby can. Hello? Can you hear me, Frank? Oh, it must just be you, Frank.
Catherine, do you want to try again? Because I think I've got audio now.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. I've forgotten the question now. Yep, I'm really enjoying the readings and the discussion boards. I usually find I read the discussion boards and find it hard to even think what I need to add because everything seems quite comprehensive. But yeah, I seem to be coping with what's expected and really enjoyed the first assessment that we did. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Yes, I've although it's pretty hard work, I've actually enjoyed it as well. The discussion boards have been fantastic in terms of the richness of responses, and I've tried to keep on top of them myself by, after a week or so, trying to sum up the conversation. So, yeah, I'm just finding them really, really fruitful. Okay, Lisa, you're next on the list. Can you hear me okay, and would you like to sort of just give your responses to those questions on the agenda? I can hear that you're trying to connect, Lisa, but I can't hear your voice. Maybe we'll come back to Lisa. Maybe can we just go to Natalie?
Hi, Frank. Sorry, I've just come zooming in. I think you're asking about the constructive alignment, what our feedback was.
No, sorry, Natalie, we're just on the agenda item 1. I was just really asking how you're coping, whether you're finding the learning experiences useful, what's working, what's not, that type of thing.
Oh, okay. You're right, it is fast-paced. I haven't yet looked at the next assignment, but I think I'm sort of up to date with the reading.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Natalie. What about Nicole?
Hi, Frank. I was struggling to get on top of it, but I feel I am there now. I'm enjoying it as well. It's good. Thanks.
Thank you. And Shelby?
Hi. Well, I guess I find myself a little bit ill-prepared for today. I'm rather not up to date on the readings myself. I've had a very full work week with my rotating roster, and but the assignment, as a novice educator myself, I do actually find everything quite challenging because all of it is new to me. I've only been tutoring for a year, so it's okay. I do like a good challenge, and as Frank, you well know, I do like to fill my schedule with many, many, many things. But yeah, I do find it quite challenging myself.
Thanks, Shelby. I think with the readings, we go through quite a lot of theoretical components early on, and then we shift the focus somewhat to your own workplace, so the actual readings diminish somewhat, and it's the application of those theoretical readings that you did up front that really comes to the fore. So if you're not up to date with the readings, I guess it doesn't really matter too much as long as you're able to get through the assessments with doing, you know, an adequate level of reading. Tim, are you available to talk? Okay, I can't actually hear Tim. Maybe I think Tim might be having audio problems, judging from what he said in one of the chat comments. Maybe can we go back to Lisa to see if Lisa can actually hear and communicate? You know what it sounds like to me, Lisa? That is that you've got the jacks in the wrong holes in your computer. So it sounds like you've got the, you know, maybe the microphone in the speakers and the speakers in the microphone. You might just want to have a check of that. And it looks like Tim's having a little bit of problem, so I might just ask if Tim could just put any comments that he might have in the chat. Sorry, Tim, I thought I heard you then.
I think I'm okay now.
Thanks, Tim. You're very faint, though. That's the only thing.
I think I'm okay now.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Janine has just joined. Janine, we're just going around the group, and I was just getting a bit of feedback on how you're coping, whether you're finding the readings, the learning experiences useful, what's working, what's not, that type of thing. Are you able to comment on that? Okay, sorry, Janine, I didn't mean to put you on the spot as soon as you sort of came into the room. I can see that you're making a chat comment, so that's fine. Look, I might just go to agenda item 2, which is the generic feedback on assessment. I just need to go to that page. It won't be a second. Welcome, Susanna. We just finished with agenda item 1, and I'm just going to give some generic feedback on assessment 1, which I thought was excellent. I thought it was a really high standard. The average was 14.82, which is essentially distinction average. I think most participants understood what the assignment was all about, the implications of changing curriculum. And I think most people understood that the content of the change, which in this case was the Essence program, wasn't really the important issue, but following a systematic process for change was what the assessment was all about. I found the responses to be, you know, assertive, critical, professional about responding to Professor Martin. A few were perhaps a bit guilty of letting their own subjective opinions about curriculum, in this case Essence, impact on the rigor of the curriculum review process, I guess. And I think the feedback I'd give to most people on curriculum review is to try and be as dispassionate as possible. even if you're really passionate about something, it's important to get the views of others, other stakeholders to come to I guess a viewpoint that's epitomizes the whole organization. So that was my feedback. As I said, it was a really good start to the unit for most people. Has anybody got any comments that they would like to make on the first assessment?
That's Catherine here. It took me a little while to actually figure out what the question was.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. In a way, that's what I wanted. I was actually trying to create sort of a bit of a problem-based environment where you really needed to almost sort of simulate a real-life situation where if somebody came up into your office and said, "We want to implement this curriculum," what would you say? So I was actually just trying to, replicate what would happen in the real world rather than spoon-feed and dictate what your responses might be. Shelby, have you got a comment?
Yeah, I found the video of the avatar describing the Essence program and Professor kind of confused me in regards to the actual assignment where it was discussed later in the document, and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to focus on, the document or the video. So I felt that the video was, I don't know, maybe this is my own personal opinion, but I felt rather taken aback myself from the video, but I understood what the document was saying. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are making sense, and I probably need to have a look at the design of that because really both needed to work seamlessly together. The only thing I would say about the video is that sometimes in e-learning, in distance learning, and in fact in all learning situations, it's good to actually create characters that might not be representative of your own opinion, and that are characters that you might find in a typical workplace, a typical health professional education environment. And these characters don't need to be perfect. I mean, Professor Martin is flawed, and I guess one of our tasks is to try and turn him around a little bit. So it's that was the I guess the overall thought behind the activity. I've just seen a comment from Tim, which I think deserves a response. And why dispassionate? I think we do need to be passionate teachers, but when we're developing curriculum, I think we need to not let our own opinions override others, which is, I think, really what I was trying to say. I think we can be passionate about our opinions, but I think we need to hear others. And I guess in some of the assessment responses, all I heard was just one opinion, which I think is probably as guilty as Professor Martin in just wanting to barrel through his opinion on what was important. So did you want to make a comment on that, Tim?
That's fine. Thanks. Thanks, Frank.
Okay. Well, thanks for that feedback. And if there is any dysfunction between the avatar and the actual activity, we've got to obviously clean that up because they should be working together properly. So thanks for that. And I guess to finish on a positive note, it really was, I thought, an excellent start to the unit for everybody. I think nearly everybody got it, and I think that was important. That was the important objective. Okay, let me just go to slide number 3. All right, this was the activity that we had on how constructivist are you? And I might just go through a little bit of the history of this, and it then it could become clear to the people that were involved in this activity. For those that weren't involved in the activity, it's probably going to be interesting for you anyway, just to hear how this activity actually panned out. The object of the exercise was to sort of try and measure how constructivist we actually are as teachers. And to do this, a questionnaire was developed. It's a pretty robust questionnaire. It was developed in the late 1990s by a person called Marilyn Goose. She's a mathematician from Queensland. And I actually used this questionnaire in my PhD in 2006 with 35 beginning teachers. And it's been a fairly reliable questionnaire. Cronbach alphas have always been pretty high on it, over 0.8, which is a good measure of reliability. Now, it's designed to measure the extent to which your beliefs about teaching and learning resonate with constructivism, the learning theory which was described in Module 2. 15 participants from this unit completed the questionnaire, which was linked on page 11 of Module 2. And I collated the responses yesterday, and those that completed the questionnaire were provided with an individual report on how they went against those questions. Just as a prelude to summarizing the results, I think it's worth pointing out that constructivism is not some kind of ideal that we all should be striving for. I think what makes teaching really interesting and challenging is the fact that it's the context that really counts. For example, what content's being delivered, what your students' needs are, that type of thing. So sometimes it's more appropriate to adopt teacher-centered rather than learner-centered approaches. So if you scored relatively low on the questionnaire, it could be that you're employing appropriate teacher-centered strategies for your groups. Now, in saying this, constructivism has been shown in the literature to engage students in deeper learning. So I think it is worth considering its attributes in a little bit more detail. Now, those attributes are up on the whiteboard there. Now, just to put everyone in the picture, the people that didn't complete the questionnaire, there was 35 items on a Likert scale with 5 response categories aiming between strongly disagree and strongly agree. The questionnaire included 19 items that supported attributes of constructivism and 16 items that contradicted these attributes. I then actually inverted the responses, attributed a number to your response so that you could get an overall measure of the extent to which you resonate with the principles of constructivism. The maximum score possible is 5, and to get this you'd need to strongly agree with the 19 items that comply with constructivism and strongly disagree with the 16 items that challenge these attributes. So the minimum score obviously is 1 and the medium score is 3. So there's 5 scales: active, cooperative, constructive, authentic, intentional. And these categories are described by a person called David Johnson, who's a bit of a guru in constructivism and meaningful learning. So when you look at the overall how our group of 15 performed against the new teachers that I interviewed in and surveyed in my PhD back in 2006, we were actually very similar. Now the numbers are pretty low, so we can't really draw much sort of conclusions. But I think when I sent out the individual analyses for individual participants, I thought when I was sending them out that the individual analyses were actually a little bit more useful than these holistic statistics. So just before I go on, it might be just a good opportunity just to throw it open to the people who received one of those individual analyses to see what you thought of it. I'll just give you a second to ponder that. for example, some of you went, didn't score highly on attributes like active, but in terms of cooperative learning, scored higher than the mean. So I think, from my point of view, it might enable you to, reflect on your teaching approach and what your strengths are, and maybe what the areas that you want to sort of focus on to try and improve are. Any comment on that?
Are you talking about me, Frank? That's exactly how I was, but I was very reasonably low on the active score, but I was quite glad that I was not too far off the mean for all the other attributes.
I wasn't actually talking about you, Heidi. It was just a general comment that I was making. But others scored really highly, particularly the people who work in a clinical context, scored really highly on the authentic attributes and constructive attributes. Because they're obviously wanting to engage people in real world and problem-based sort of environments, and maybe didn't score too well on others. But I just want to reiterate that it's not about trying to reach this magic number of 5. Your environment will dictate what the most appropriate teaching strategies, teaching and learning strategies that you actually implement. And so, it could be entirely appropriate that you focus on cooperative and maybe not on some of the other attributes. Do you think it was a worthwhile exercise to actually reflect on how you fared in relation to these attributes of meaningful learning that are identified in the literature? Yes, Nicole.
Yeah, it gave me food for thought, because I did score quite high on constructive and authentic, and I only work clinically, but quite low on active. So there may be an area for improvement there, or food for thought anyway.
Well, I guess that was what it was all about, just trying to create some food for thought. I'm thinking of somebody who's involved in clinical skills, for example, and sometimes you might not want too much activity in the room. You really just want to demonstrate something and get people to understand that this is the way that it is actually done, and it's worked for quite a long time, and it's appropriate to follow that method. I don't think we should go too far to the extent that everybody's got their own opinions on how to do something and how to solve a problem. Okay, so just before we move on from this one then, the last couple of comments I would make are, well, I mean, generally the health professional education cohort performed reasonably similarly to new teachers in general, and that I suspect that health professional education participants are a little bit more supportive of problem solving, and I think expect students to have more control over their learning. That intentional aspect, that last attribute, that's what that one is all about, whether students are taking control of their own learning, and I think we do expect that, and I think that would be natural to assume that, because we're working in an adult learning environment, whereas these new teachers were working in a primary and secondary education environments. Any last comments on this before we move to the next activity? Okay, good. I'll just get the next page sorted out. I won't be a moment. Okay, we're actually going to go on a bit of a web tour now. I'm going to go to a YouTube video, and we'll listen to a character that I've created. It's a fictional character called Professor Walter Bloom, and the overall objective of this activity is to promote a little bit of discussion on constructive alignment in the real world. So this has got a little bit of I guess implications for the assessment that's due this Friday. So let's just go on a little bit of a web tour to to see what Professor Walter Bloom has got to say. I hope you're going to be able to hear him properly.
Hello, my name is Professor Walter Bloom. I'm a PBL tutor.
Sorry, just as we're going here, could you just give me a tick if you can hear Professor Walter Bloom? Okay, so Shelby and Nicole can. I'll just play it through and hopefully some of the people who have got X's will actually get it as it starts streaming.
Some of these learning outcomes are crucially important in some lessons. My latest problem, for example, which was concerned with body defense mechanisms, included 37 learning actions across 4 different days. These needed to be covered in 3 tutorials. To make some decisions about how much to be covered and to what depth. There is certainly a difference between the formal curriculum and the taught curriculum. There is another issue that makes learning outcomes in PBL a little difficult, and that is that they should be arrived at by the student, not teachers. The whole idea of PBL is that students appraise their own knowledge gaps, because we have already
Okay, I don't know how successful that was. I saw some ticks and some crosses. So what I've done is I've just posted the actual YouTube URL in the chat line there, and I'll give everybody 2 or 3 minutes just to go to that URL and listen to it. If you've already heard it, maybe just go and listen to it again. So I'll just I'll give people a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll reconvene. Okay, I hope you've had a chance to look at that video. Can I just get a quick indication as to how many people were not able to hear the video? If you weren't able to hear that video, view that video, just put an X, a red X in the against your name there, so I know. Okay, so it looks like about 3. Now, I'm hoping that the activity will still work. Basically, Professor Walter Bloom is a PBL tutor at St. Michael's School of Health. He's shared his views on PBL and constructive alignment and how he feels about constructive alignment as a PBL tutor. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to automatically put you into some breakout groups. There's a function here in Blackboard Collaborate that allows that to happen. Where I'm actually going to create 3 breakout rooms. So I'm hoping that what will happen is that you'll all just get put into those breakout rooms and put into a situation where you need to now discuss Professor Bloom's little speech there that you heard on the video. Now, when you go into those breakout rooms, I'm just going to go to the next slide actually, because there's 3 questions that I was going to ask you to address. Now, if you're in breakout room 1, there's a specific question for you, which I'll leave on the whiteboard. Breakout room 2 and breakout room 3 have got questions as well. So you just need to choose a spokesperson for your breakout room and then you can report back into the to the main room in about 5 minutes time. And what will happen in 5 minutes is I'll just close down the breakout room, so you'll just be put back into the main room, I think. I'm not sure about all this because I've never actually used it before, but here we go. Okay, I hope that everybody can hear me. I don't know how successful that was. I told you I was going to push the boundaries though. So I think you're all back in the main room now. Just give me a tick if you can hear me correct. Okay. Great, that's close enough. So maybe could I get somebody from breakout room 1 to just report back, firstly on how you found the process, and secondly, if possible, to give a response to that question that's posed to breakout room 1. Okay, go ahead, Heidi.
Is that working?
Yeah.
This is Heidi from Breakout Group 1. Our question was, is it reasonable to be selective with 37 learning objectives over 3 tutorials? Essentially, our discussion was that yes, we are actually obliged to try and cover the 37 learning objectives if it's set out in the curriculum, and we should give it a really good shot to trying to do so. With an attempt to change the curriculum later if it's ineffective. The proviso was the context may be important, how in-depth each of these learning objectives actually are, considering that they're specific, they might be quite small items. Further from the question of is it effective, to try and focus firstly on those that have the most impact with practice and way of doing things, emphasize those things first, so in that way you're being a little bit selective but then trying to do all the other perhaps less significant learning objectives as well. So we're just going for it in room 1.
Thank you, Heidi. And how did you find the actual process of going out to breakout room 1 and talking? Did that work?
Well, I'm pushing the boundaries I've moved from my desktop to my iPhone, so I'm actually finding it a little bit tricky. The iPhone doesn't work as well, so personally I found it a little bit more challenging with the little emoticons. But we did have a few people speak. It's a bit harder to know on the phone who's ready to speak or not.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. And somebody from breakout room 2, could you possibly report back to the same questions?
Well, Tim here. Can you hear me, Frank?
Yes, I can, Tim.
Well, we did talk about the challenge. I think to summarise, we can empathise perhaps with Walter's perhaps sense of disempowerment, but at the same time, I guess we can be a bit critical and say he does need to be assertive and overcome his sort of sense of powerlessness and start to think about partnering more actively with various other domains, with the students and with the assessment people, I guess, to think how better to connect up the various bits of the curriculum. Having said that, I guess we can all relate a little bit to feeling a little bit disempowered and finding curriculum very hard at times, and there is a tendency sometimes to blame students for that rather than realising there's a lot that we can do ourselves.
Thank you, Tim. And in terms of the process, did you find it useful to get into a smaller group and discuss the question with that smaller group?
Personally, I found it helpful. It was just difficult initially. We didn't have the question in front of us, so I think we were a bit at a loss there. But with the question in front of us, it was not bad. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Yes, that was one piece of the jigsaw that I didn't really know how to do, so I was floundering around in the background here trying to figure out how to get that slide onto the breakout rooms. Whiteboards. Now, the other thing that I was wanting to do and that I thought I did was to actually create 3 breakout rooms, but only 2 were created for some reason. So the last question, should Walter have more control over the variables, and how would you go about empowering him to take more responsibility for constructive alignment? And I think that touches on what Tim has just said. I think, yes, he should have more control over the variables. I think every teacher should try and have a really integral role in curriculum development, because that's their job. And so if a teacher hasn't got that sort of input and role, then I think they need to be, as Tim has suggested, be assertive and try and influence the curriculum in the proper way. And the same goes for assessment. If you haven't got any control over the assessment questions, get involved with developing questions so that you have got some input into that. So they're my views on these issues about constructive alignment. Just before we go off this topic, can I just have a bit of a response from somebody who's working more in the clinical world rather than the university world as to how you go about ensuring constructive alignment in your particular area? Perhaps somebody like Nicole, you work in a clinical setting?
I often find it really hard because what they're taught at university level doesn't equate to my workplace. So in order to try and align it more, I break them into smaller groups. I find 1 or 2 to 3 max students at a time and try to teach them what they need to know to relate to the clinical more.
And do you have a role in assessment, Nicole?
Yeah, I do at a clinical level. So I do quite a bit of their assessment there. And unless I did, I think if I didn't break it down and make it use learning objectives and activities that I could relate to, I'd find it very difficult to actually assess them accurately. Okay, thanks, Nicole. Now I'm just going to go on to the next slide because it sort of leads into the assessment that's due this Friday, which is really about constructive alignment. And there's been a number of people that have actually contacted me by email or phone, just getting some clarification on assessment 2. So I thought I'd really just share what I've been saying to all of the people that have contacted me. And essentially what the assessment's all about is trying to demonstrate that you've got a thorough understanding of constructive alignment, but also show some evidence that you've looked at constructive alignment in relation to your own workplace or in relation to some of those articles that were provided in the literature, and really understand why constructive alignment actually isn't, it can be a problem. And some of the issues associated with really sort of implementing constructive alignment in your own context. And just in terms of the the nuts and bolts of it, most people have asked how many slides do you want and how do you actually
Do you want an attachment to the slides in relation to any sort of textual support for the slides? Really what I said to that was, between 5 and 10 slides is fine. And really what the notes area on the PowerPoint is designed to sort of really document what you're actually wanting to say to each slide in dot point format. So use that notes feature on PowerPoint just to really say what you would say to that slide. And the other thing is just to make sure that you include references, even though it is a PowerPoint presentation, just to make sure that you acknowledge the readings that you've actually come across. Has anybody got any other questions about Assessment 2?
Frank, do you want the references in the notes for each slide that it's related to, or a reference list at the end of, like an attachment at the end of the presentation?
Probably what would be best would be just to have the last slide of your PowerPoint presentation just being the references. I know that might be a little bit inauthentic as far as if you were doing this for Professor Martin, but I think it's just easier just to put all of the references at the end on a slide. No other questions on Assessment 2? Okay.
Yeah, Tim here, Frank. I'm just wondering, are there any particular sort of schools of thought or authors who are well known for their critique of constructive alignment? I mean, which sort of journal articles or journals would be into criticizing constructive alignment? Is it would you be looking in the general health journals or health professional journals or academic medicine, wherever? I mean, I just don't feel as though I know the journal landscape well enough to know sort of where to look, if you like.
Thanks, Tim. The two articles that I felt were quite critical of constructive alignment was one by Hussey and Smith, and the other one was, I think that was in medicine, and the other one was Jervis and Jervis, which was, I think, in nursing from memory. So I think if you just started with those two articles as a starting point, and they're linked into Module 2, and then maybe look at some of the references that they cite, and if you're still feeling like you really need to sort of delve deeper, get back to me and I can put you in touch with a couple of other perspectives.
Thanks, Frank. I have had difficulty getting the Jervis and Jervis at home and here as well. The link doesn't, I'm not seeming to get through. I'm getting to the journal, but not to the journal article, and having fun. I don't know about other people, but thanks for the suggestion.
I think in relation to the Jervis and Jervis article, a number of people have had that issue. It's a web-based PDF, and I'm not sure on why it's so intermittent. So what I might do, Tim, is I'll send out a bulk email tomorrow with the Jervis and Jervis article attached as a PDF so that everybody's got access to it. Okay, we're almost out of time, but I thought I would also just quickly mention Assessment 3 since it's due on the 24th of April. And the idea of the first two assessments was really to go into the metaphor of St. Michael's, but Assessments 3, 4 and 5 are really shifting to your own practical work context. So we're really looking at you now applying from Assessment 3 onwards I guess the learning that has occurred in the theoretical aspects of the module to your own work context, whether that be a lesson, whether that be a workshop, a problem if you're in a problem-based environment, an entire course. So we want you to look at a learning sequence and think about how you might want to change that learning sequence. Think about how you want to plan it out, that comes in assessment 4, and in fact even implement the change, which is assessment 5. So my advice is to try and choose something reasonably doable, a change that you'd like to make that's probably been bugging you for a while, that this could be done better, and think about how you can engineer that change through this unit. Any questions on that? Okay, it's been quite an exhausting session for me, and probably yourselves as well. So we'll just skip quickly to the last 2 slides. In fact, the last slide, which is really saying when the next meeting is, which is Thursday the 23rd of April at 5 o'clock. So that is actually the day before assessment 3 is due, which was really the reason why I wanted to put assessment 3 up there tonight for any discussion. Okay, so any final comments from anybody about today's session? Any burning questions that you've got?
I think we could have a whole session on how to overcome your technical difficulties.
I think there could be a course on that, Tim, never mind a session. Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for your participation tonight and for getting in the spirit of it. And I look forward to the next session and dealing with you all individually over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Thanks again and goodbye.
Thanks, Frank.